welcome back. Today is the day you finally see 6 insane sites on the internet finally break my brain. Let's just get started because I don't know how to start this video, but I know you're going to like what we have inside. So this is obviously going to be a stream of the same exact format we've been used to. We're going to talk about 6 insane sites that have just taken over the internet by the way they're working and that are just some true inspiration for the UI UX designers in the room. Let's just get started. The first site that I want to talk about today is awwwards.com, which is a portfolio, and it's a confusing portfolio to say the least. the first thing that catches your brain is the weirdly starky contrast, and it's kind of difficult to see, but it's there, and it's kind of visible, and it's kind of pretty. The first and most insane thing that happens is you get hit with the same exact shade of yellow over and over again, and that's quite fun. You have a little bit of a boldness into the title that they're going for, which wasn't present in any of the sites yesterday, so I'm pretty glad that happened. There is white space, which is also exactly what we need, and wow, as I'm saying this, I realized I haven't turned on my screen. What an embarrassment. I think at this point I just have to start over again. This is exactly the kind of thing that happens that makes me want to be embarrassed, but I choose to rise above. Let's just get started. This is the first site, oceanhour.com, and the first and most awfully catchy thing about it is the weird yellow, which isn't supposed to exist because it's a little too much. It just is, and you have white spacing. That sense is always present, and I kind of like that. You also have your standard fonts and fonts that give you a little bit of contrast, so you're not ending up in a position that uses the same exact fonts over and over again. You start off with a nice serif and then take the descriptions over to a serif font, and it's very, very clear, but there is a lot of white space and there is a lot of hierarchy. But I think the most starking and jarring thing in the whole world is how in your face the entire dynamic is. Let's just keep on scrolling because I do expect there to be a little bit of parallax. So sometimes we talk about parallax because it is a different scrolling speed when it comes to two different elements on a single page, but we also want to talk about what happens when something zooms out through the same exact processes that make parallax happen, and something changes its shape and size and position, and I think this is exactly what happens as soon as we get started. I am a little bit disappointed at how quickly this site is sort of ending because the scroll bar is kind of over, but I do think you can open and close specific projects, which is actually kind of nice because you have a little bit of the same exact brand consistency maintained over and over again. You have the right amount of white space, you have the right amount of color, and you have the right fonts to make all of it happen. And I don't think I do have any major complaints other than the fact that it's just really, really short to be able to understand anything at all. And it is short. Like, even if you wanted to say much more about the site, it's just way too small for me to even say anything. Let's just keep on going because what else am I going to do? You can scroll and it does give you some funny parallax effects, but at the end of the day, it's a small site with a limited number of elements and a limited number of things it can do, and overall it just ends right here. I am interested in seeing what happens when you take the whole thing responsive and when you try to make it smaller. Does it retain the effects in especially the ones it had on its first page? I think it does. I think it actually does, but I would be surprised if it didn't. So that's exactly what they've done to get it responsive. I was kind of expecting it. Instead of having everything go very, very vertically, they're sort of trying to make things very horizontal, and you can tap to find out each of these individual ones, although it does work a little bit funky because I don't remember immediately clicking on this. So I think it happens and it doesn't happen, and it's a little bit of an icky situation at best. With that said, very, very small site, disappointingly so, but there isn't a lot that's very wrong with it. I think the colors were a little bit jarring, but at the end of the day, all of the basic principles that you would ever want to have are present. No questions asked, 9 out of 10. The next site that I want to talk about today is also quite fun. This is Flow, and I think it's going to be really, really close on a first impression basis to what the perfect site is in my mind. The first and most jarring and visible factor about it is the fact that you have these really huge fonts take up their space, take up their time. You have a pattern on the hero section. It's not very random. It's not exactly images dumped in the middle of nowhere. You have a pattern that's going and a specific way things are supposed to flow. And even if it's it's a little bit different. I think people will get adjusted to the way things are, especially because you have a pattern going. There is a lot of white space, and there is a font hierarchy, which is also great, but also at the end of the day, it leaves you questioning why these elements would genuinely take up this much space to even exist, and why that continues to happen over and over again. So I think overall it's a fine site. It's a fun, imaginative hero section at best, and you can play the reel, but I want to avoid doing that because it's a video, and video on video in live stream is kind of messed up. With that said, you can keep on scrolling forward, and I love the fact that they have animations take you back into the way you're working with things, and they have the ability to keep things going, and let everything just scroll exactly the way it is. You also have the ability to see whatever they want to talk about in huge fonts in front of your face. There is no hiding, there is no making things smaller than they actually are, and there is a very clear ability of being able to make things as big as you want, and being able to see exactly what you're talking about. There is white space, which is exactly what you would expect, and also there is a little bit of a description if you want to know more. So I think it does fulfill all of the elements that you would want to have, but I do have my doubts, because at some point some of this stuff, for some exact reasons, starts to feel too jarring. One good thing though is the fact that when they chose to take a header that was entirely black and they chose to make it sticky, they've kind of reverted the colors a little bit. So this color isn't exactly black, it's an inverse of whatever happens in the background, which means even when it interacts with something that's purely black, it'll only appear white, which kind of slips the whole dynamic over when these words would otherwise have gotten lost. So I think that's kind of cool, kind of smart. It's kind of something that you would never forget. The next section that I want to talk about right off the bat is this one. You have a split layout, you have a split screen, there is a little bit of a white space going, you have an image, and you have text that just takes up all of the space it needs to. There is description, there is basically everything you'd want, and it's a different layout. Overall, there aren't anything specific that I could point out that are just extremely wrong, although things do get imaginative and they do take a turn, and it does end up looking sometimes a little bit unnatural, especially in situations like these where you just don't know what things are and how they're supposed to be situated. You also have really, really big descriptions of the stuff that you would need to have in front of your face, which is also kind of nice. You have a little bit of an about us description, you have a full footer, which is awesome, but I am a little bit appalled by the fact that all of these are in no order hierarchy icon at all. And I think the fact that was internally jarring to me from the get-go was the fact that you have all of this text and there is no icons, there is nothing that is supposed to be very, very visual, which is usually a fact in almost all of these sites, and you end up making the opposites of what's supposed to be big, and it's kind of opposite in terms of typography as well, because you have these huge fonts that were supposed to be huge in their headings in terms of connect and navigate, which you made small, and I can understand that, but I think this just becomes too big for its own good really, really quickly, and it starts off trying to be something original, but for some reason either I've seen way too many of these sites, or it is the fact that this is just very, very predictable for a site of this format. Overall, 8 out of 10, because I think there was a lot of effort to get to this level of originality and not step on anyone's toes, get anything directly wrong, but at the end of the day, it just has video embeds to compensate for the fact that you actually needed to have some images, something that was a little bit more visual, and I think the focus on text just went a little too far, to a point where it's just difficult to figure out anything else. With that said, I'm going to the next site. The next site that we're talking about is toyfight.co. This is supposed to be a fun one, and I expect it to be fun simply because it's going to be related to toys, and it's going to be related to fun, and I have high hopes. I'm not going to lie about it at all. An unmistakably original design studio, and again you have the common video game font, which is absolutely incredible, and you have your spacing, a ton of white space, never leaving any room for complaints at all. You have all of these weird pills for your description, and you have your logo, and you have press / for whatever your main button is, which is all very, very smart and very, very cool actually. And when you have a site that has the actual ability to fit into themes that it's supposed to be in, for example, this is a game related studio and it manages to bring forth that dynamic very, very easily, I think that's truly a safe place to say that you are actually winning with this hero section. This hero section, completely incredible to me. absolutely incredible. And then we go to the next section, which is a bunch of blacks and negative space and a bunch of area that's just supposed to be there. Again, there's a video. I apologize for not being able to play it. I'm just too scared of getting weird sound issues on this stream, which is exactly why I'm trying to stay away from all of that. I think I've seen the site somewhere else. I think this is the GSAP site, and they made it. Is that the case? It might be the case. The fact that I've seen the site and I've seen their works is so awesome, and it's absolutely incredible, and it makes sense why they'd have this level of clarity when it comes to design, because as hard as I want to try, I don't think I can find anything wrong with the white space or the font pairings. Everything works exactly as it's supposed to, and I'm going to talk about why, simply because on the one hand you're trying to bring to attention the fact that this is a very gaming based studio, and on the other hand you're also trying to bring a certain amount of attention to the fact that this is a fancy studio in terms of its originality, and when you want fancy and original and really really sophisticated looking, the first choice is almost always serif, which is exactly what they do right here. So I think they do get their own vibe very very well, and they are able to portray that very very quickly and easily. A rare trait, and it does reflect at how perfect this site works. It's just perfect. This is the GSAP site, and I'm having instant flashbacks of GSAP. Programmers in the audience, type GSAP in the comments, because I know you saw this. With that said, there is a bunch of tags, and it's really really nice to be able to see that. You also have a simple footer, nothing too complicated, nothing too funny, and it does make sense. It's very very simple. So overall, the site of the people who made the site of GSAP, 10 out of 10, because I don't really see much wrong with it. Even the loading animation is absolutely incredible. You have their featured projects, and you can basically view them exactly as you want to. I am having high hopes for the case studies of the site of GSAP, because we've all worked with GSAP. If you don't know what GSAP is until now, when you take animations that you've built in Figma, Framer, wherever you're prototyping your things, and you try to bring that very very natively through code inside of any real site, that's where GSAP comes in, and GSAP will animate absolutely anything, and it'll do it much more easily than if you were trying to construct it with your basic 1 2 3 4 coding aspect of the entire area. So that's just what GSAP does, and they're able to bring their animation and their design very very quickly. And I also like the fact that they have a very different vibe according to the project that they work. This is GSAP, and it's very very consistent, but also when you go to check out the other works that they've done, they do pay very close attention to the brand that they're actually working with, and you will actually start to see the fact that GSAP was very very fun looking and very inviting, and then this other site is very very sophisticated with whatever culture it's representing, and I think they're very very clear of what their brand actually does, which is exactly why you see the level of clarity in everything that they do very very simply, and I think that's truly incredible. 10 out of 10, no doubts at all. The next site that we're talking about, of course we're talking about another site. The next site that we're talking about is Cartier watches and wonders, because it's kind of unexpected to get this much sophistication from a watch brand, but apparently we're getting it, so why should we not? Let's just get started talking about this. The first and most awesome thing that happens is there is a bunch of animation, even though I'm not doing anything at all, and it does take over the entire area with its own theme and vibe, and you kind of can get started with exactly the way things are working, and it's really really nice. But also there is a lot of 3D, which is actually quite incredible, because from a place of 2D to 3D and imagining it very very easily is a difficult rock to cross for many. So with that said, there is a ton of white space. You have your basic fonts, you have your basic consistencies of fonts, so this font and this font is exactly the same. There is typography and there is hierarchy with that typography, so I think most of the basic aspects can be appreciated. There is a lot of color that actually makes sense here, and everything that you have as a single element is also matching somewhere else. I have no idea why this is scrolling so weirdly, and especially because I'm trying to go in. So when you go to this element, you have a similar color in the background, which is exactly what's supporting what you're building, and I think that's just kind of what ties the whole vibe together. I'm not entirely sure if this scrolls further. It actually does, and the colors that it is using for its classic elegance, it tries to continue them for as long as it can possibly do that, and you actually are able to see their 3D models work. I think this is more of a 3D site than a 2D site, but also the fact that it can zoom in so quickly and pull you into its perspective and get things to work is absolutely insane to me, and it's absolutely incredible. Overall, solid 3D, difficult to understand everything else that's happening. 7 out of 10 not the biggest fan, not the biggest hater. It's just not very, very personal, especially because you start with 3D, and 3D is exactly what goes all the way through, and there isn't even a lot of elements that come into play. So I think it does become really, really boring really, really quickly. With that said, I am also a little bit surprised at the fact that all of these sites today, even the ones that were supposed to be good, are just so small and so compact that you actually are able to see what they're doing. With that said, this is the next site that we're talking about, Chapeau Studio. I think studiochapeau.com is the domain name. The very first thing that I see and that I'm an absolute fan of is the fact that you have a lot of background, and you have the background changing with the title changing, and it takes up its space, and it takes up the fact that it has two different fonts, and it instead of delaying the ability to see your social media handles, anything that's description based or anything that's copyright based, instead of waiting for you to be able to go to the footer and check it, they let you see it on the right side as an element of the footer, which is working vertically these days. So with that said, very, very incredible. You don't really get to see this that often, and they've taken all of the basic elements that you were supposed to have, for example a title bar and a description and a footer and a header and whatever else you need to have, and they've sort of mixed it up and made it work in a different vibe. So I think that really does make things work really well together. This site is in German, so I have absolutely no idea what it does, but with that said, there is a lot of white space. I am hoping there was an image that was supposed to be here that got lost somehow, but even if there isn't, it's not the end of the world really. And then you have a bunch of super duper simple, super duper cool images dividing the section into two separate parts, which is also incredible. You have a bunch of descriptions, you have a bunch of pieces of text staying exactly where they are, you have a bunch of images, and absolutely everything that needs to be present is present. The color theme is very, very simple, very, very consistent. When you're working with black, white and gray, I don't think there's anything you can do to go wrong there at all. And you also have a weird cursor hijack with the eye, with these text boxes and with these images, and you actually get to see those happen in real time. You have a bunch of images, and you have a bunch of very, very visual descriptions of the stuff that you're making, and it just ties itself up really, really well together. Again, simple cards, nothing complicated. Everything that's supposed to be there is there, which is kind of nice, and everything that's supposed to exist does exist. Animated things are animated, and the things that aren't supposed to be animated, I don't think there's a lot of excessive motion, so you can't really say it's not very animated, and the color themes work, and the palette works. And this, by the way, surprisingly is an advancement of the brand guideline colors that you usually see. So I think that's very simple as well. Overall, not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's certainly very, very original, and I think you have to applaud that on your own. As soon as you start scrolling, surprisingly, these circles and these squares are kind of animating on their own, and this is exactly what GSAP would have done if GSAP were used. Is that used? I don't know. Are we going to find out? Quite possibly, because I am down to going down through that rabbit hole. Will we find out? I now I'm starting to doubt it, especially because we're working with a very responsive system here, which is crushed together on its own. Are we ever going to see? Yes, I think there is GSAP. I think there's a little bit of a GSAP or some library used here, or something really, really advanced used with JavaScript, because you have these elements change their size as you're scrolling, and that's definitely not the simplest thing in the world to do. And then you have your text pop up exactly where you need it to be. So with that said, is this the most complicated site in the whole world? Certainly not. Is this the most simplest site in the whole world? It's not that either. A simple site with its simple sections working exactly as it needs to. I am a little bit surprised at how well this navigation bar worked out. You have your two different sections on the screen, you have your different descriptions, and you have your shapes, and it does really tie the entire dynamic together. So I just have to give them that, and then you get to see a very, very consistent style across everything that you're doing. So as soon as we started, we saw a very, very simple layout, especially in the sections where it is cut into half, where the page cuts itself into half, and then you have the work section, which basically cuts itself into half as well. So it's very, very consistent in terms of the expectations it sets for you, and it just makes sense. Overall, what do I rate? this site? What do I think of it? I think this site is a solid 8 out of 10, especially because it's kind of not the most original thing I've ever seen, but it also takes wild experimentational guesses into placing things, for example the footer or the menu, not where they're supposed to be, and it does give you some clear description of what it's supposed to be. So I think overall can't question it a lot. I don't have anything to say about the content writing because I don't read German, and then finally we're getting back to the site that we started the stream for. This is the site in the thumbnail, you guys, the grand finale, the one we've been waiting for. The portfolio of Luis Bizarro, because why would we not? As I get started, there are a couple of things I would want to talk about. Number one, there is a lot of white space, which is incredible. You have a bunch of really cool cursor animations which last exactly as long as hover over them, and there is a bunch of simple detail that is very simple and very present, and it's just right there. You have all of their footer related elements and all of their descriptions right here. I am a little bit disappointed by the fact that there isn't enough visual in here, but I'm also not stuck about it. And then you also have a bunch of really simple text that works exactly as it's supposed to. The most simplest font in the whole wide world, Arial, is used, which does leave me questioning the whole typography sense of things, because when you start off with a font that is as glamorous as this, then it does become questionable why you would stick with Arial for the rest of the entirety of the site, which is a big question in my head. And then you also have the simple descriptions and the ability to divide the sections in two parts. I think one of the things that we've seen over and over again with these sites is they'll divide the whole page into either 50-50 or 75-25 or whatever it is that they're choosing to, and they'll stay consistent with that kind of a breakpoint, and they'll stay consistent in exactly how they're doing it. So I think that's also really nice. And then you have this really nice 3D element which does work on its own no matter what I do, but the cursor hijack is incredible, and I would want to see how you would make that, especially in something like Figma, because you're working with something that's really colorful and really dynamic. And if you guys want to see, type out Figma in the comments and we will make it in Figma Live. So I think that's also very implied, especially with these streams. With that said, as I said right before we started, you started with an element that kind of looks like this, divided your section in two parts, and it does really get the whole thing into life, and it does get the thing to work really well. So I think it's definitely consistent, which is exactly what you would want from a site like this when you're working with something that looks exactly like this. I think one thing to make sure is, when you make something that's entirely original and it does look good, it is a good time to keep on repeating it over and over again, especially as a pattern, because now it's consistent and now it's actually making a lot of sense. And then you also have the MacBook Pro, which is an inspiration from the actual MacBook Pro site, which I have no idea what is happening now. Either this person worked with Apple or something happened in terms of 3D models. What am I missing? This is a 3D specialist. Wow, I just absolutely forgot what we were doing at this point. This is a 3D specialist, which is exactly why this seems like it's taken from Apple. It's probably his work, and it's absolutely incredible in the sense it does take the classic custom Apple header and it does make it work along with the custom fonts of Apple and along with the ability to switch these. But I do think the weird cursor hijack makes it absolutely impossible for you to click on anything, which is funny. And it does have all of the elements that it's supposed to have, but it distorts them before you're able to work with them, before you're able to use any of these filters, simply because the cursor hijack is either too much or it's unmindful of the fact that you actually have some options, and it just keeps on ignoring them and you are not able to click on anything at all. So I think the both of those things are simultaneous in absolutely every way, and they just work really well. With that said, once again, we see the appearance of the custom card that was very consistent. I am a little bit disappointed again by the fact that you're not able to switch these things around, but again, the consistent card is remaining consistent absolutely everywhere it goes. And then you have your image, and then you have your descriptions, and then you have your games, and it stays exactly the way it's supposed to stay. So at this point, I feel like they have a lot of images of the same exact 3D render, and it's in different versions and colors and dynamics, and it does work really well in that area. But I do think it becomes difficult to interact with the site of a 3D artist when you're working with 3D, and yet the cursor has such a bad hijack that you're not able to test it and you're not able to work with it. So with that said, is this a site I like? Probably. Is this the best site in the world? Probably not. Is this the worst site in the world? Once again, probably not. I think this site does really work well in its specifics, but also you're not able to interact with anything. Probably because this is all an image, because this seems to be an image and the other one seemed to either be a video or an mp3, which is basically a video. Why am I saying video 2 different times? So with that said, what do I think of this site? This is a 6 out of 10, simply because when you start working with a lot of 3D, you expect there to be an ability to see what's happening and to see what's 3D and to see the ability to be able to work with it. But when you have a really complicated but weird cursor hijack that takes over, you have nothing left to say. And I think this does really work well in its own dynamics. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, this is the 6th site, 6 out of 10. How very fitting. And I hope you enjoyed this stream, because overall we talked about 6 incredible sites that make a lot of sense. I will see you tomorrow, 9 p.m. Indian Standard Time or 3:30 p.m. GMT, wherever you are, and keep on designing.